There's no rule that says I have to start off this. Why don't you say something? We're watching Treasure Planet today. I should disclose that this isn't a hate watch. A little bit of backstory on it. It's an adaptation of Robert Stevenson's Treasure Island, blended with more of a steampunk sci-fi interpretation, given where it sits in terms of like the transitional time period of Disney, where they went from 2D animation to kind of delving more into the 3D stuff that is largely what we're seeing today with their releases. It has a really cool blend of both animation styles in it that makes it one of Disney's more unique visual films, in my opinion at least. I think it's a great movie. I think it's largely underrated. I can't believe it did what it did at the box office. Let's just have a quick googs. Just under $110 million in the box office against a $140 million budget. I mean, it flopped more than flip-flops. So we're just gonna go through this and point out some of the reasons from a story standpoint that this film is really a solid piece. I mean, just look at that price differential from last week's video. Oh, and it fixed the headphones. This movie took 10 years to make, having had the longest production cycle of any movie in Disney's post-Renaissance era. We got a nice contrast between the gold and the purple sky here. He looks like a bad guy. No, it's good visual storytelling, not a whole lot of heavy lifting happening there. This is what I'm getting at though, we've got 3D animation happening here, but then they're very clearly two-dimensional drawings. Subverting one of the more traditional tropes here in the Disney discography, which is that a lot of the films tend to just have borderline fourth wall breaking animation or narration and not necessarily worked into the world beyond that. In this respect, it's a reader. The narration that we're hearing has some sort of anchor within the story beyond it being just a narrative plot device.
Oh, can those eyes get...
See, I always thought that this voice actress was Jennifer Aniston. I'm learning for the first time here. It's Laurie Metcalf. Shiny, suitably shiny.
Gathering up their spoils. Vanished.
Notice how we've had a shift visually in the color of the sky. It was a more peaceful purple and gold, and now post this disaster, post the ship being bombarded by pirates, we are leaving it in a colder blue with a much harsher orange.
Flint's secret trove was never found. The loot of 1,000 worlds.
Setting up the main overarching drive. They do cheat a little bit here. We get a visual association with what the planet will actually look like. You could make the argument that this information got leaked out in taverns and things like that. What's cool about it, when you think treasure hunt, right? Treasure on the map is usually marked by an X.
How do you think Captain Flint did it, Mom?
That's not just an innocuous question. That's something that will be answered by the end of the film. They have technology that's different to what we would consider what was definitely possible for the 1800s, but also this is clearly a world where advancement has been had. If a script does a good job, when they show you stuff like that further on down the line, you'll get a better sense of how that's possible. It might not necessarily be addressed overtly, but as long as you kind of have visual clues that help you gauge how this world has made those advancements, then the script will still be of a certain quality.
You think somebody will ever find Treasure Planet?
I think
Another
it's
question?
more like a legend.
We have a loving family dynamic being set up here, but she's not necessarily got his same love for or his same belief in the stories that he's reading about. You're just trying to set up the dynamics, the world, the focus of the film, and this sort of opening 10 pages. That's really the goal as a screenwriter. Notice how a scene doesn't necessarily have to just do one thing at a time. The more it can do within the same setup, the better, really. Effectively, of course, you don't want to just throw a bunch of shit in there. You kind of want it to play out believably.
Made one's spirit soar.
Got a cool match cut there. More of a hint at the technology. Notice how it's not like a lush product, right? It's pretty patchy and sort of run down piece of metal for the most part. This is a world in which they have this fantastic technology, but varying degrees of it are accessible by supposedly socioeconomic class. So he's pretty skilled, pretty fearless. Rule breaker. Now we're setting up a new setting. The mom is now working in a bed and breakfast with an eclectic clientele. This is a world that might feel semi-similar to our own, but it has its own unique elements to it. There's a consistency to the world building that has to happen in every scene in order to feel cohesive.
And it's a big bowl of Zarellian jelly worms for the big boy.
So she likes owning the bed and breakfast. That's what we're getting at here. While tired, she does have an enthusiasm for her work.
Go away.
Everything that you set up really has to be paid off by the end of the film, right? We sat on that moment for a substantial amount of time. That was probably like a minute-long scene, I would have guessed, or at least 30 seconds, hinting at the fact that this one character is going to be more important than the previous family that got an interaction. He's been talking in the setting for a vast amount of time. And what we set up already is that he's a bit of a reader. We've got an academic look about him, not very good with kids, as we can see. So by the end of the film, for him to not have been a flat character, that'll have had to have evolved in one way or the other. Knowing who our protagonist is, we need a sense of how his relationship is going to work with Jim.
I know he had some rough spots earlier this year, but I really think that he's starting to turn a corner.
Mrs. Hawkins.
Subverting expectations.
We apprehended your son operating a solar vehicle in a restricted area. Moving violation 904, section 15, paragraph 6.
Reinforcing the fact that it's not out of character for him to have, been trespassing places.
Are you the boy's father?
Oh,
What? No.
good heavens,
No.
no.
What we haven't seen so far is the kid's actual dad. It was him and his mom in the early scene, and even 12 years later, the actual father isn't in the picture. So by not including him, we're not being told yet that the father isn't in the picture, but we're starting to pick up clues. Contrast happening visually between what he's wearing here and the brighter colors that his mother's wearing. So she's operating as the reins to pull him back, from the edge of the line that he's very much walking.
I just don't want to see you throw away your entire future.
So that's her motive. But she's torn again between managing this business and helping him out. And he, as we're about to see,
What future?
he doesn't really feel like he has any sense of direction in life. He's just kind of adrift.
And you know how smart he is. He built his first solar surfer when he was 8, and yet he's failing at school. He is constantly in trouble, and when I talk to him, he's like a stranger to me.
It is getting a bit expository in this scene. He's pretty smart. We didn't necessarily know that, but in retrospect, her saying that he built his first solar surfboard and having seen him ride one that looked like it was handmade. So he's smart, but he's also failing out of school, directionless, and very much someone his mother doesn't recognize. And we're seeing what's happening here is largely due to the absence of the father figure in his life. Again, we're just getting more clues into the thematic undertone.
Mister, you okay in there, right?
So as much as he is a trespasser, he's still good-natured. The second he sees someone crash, he runs to help. There was a cheat in the script there. There was a understanding of who was going to be inside of the ship before the door even opened, and we actually got to see the captain who was flying it. That'll have been the writers, knowing where it was going to go and then writing that in. But the character, Jim, wouldn't necessarily have that knowledge yet.
He's after me chest. That fiendish cyborg.
Again, that's not just dialogue for the sake of dialogue. We're getting clues into more characters that are likely to appear in the story. So I was literally about to point this out, but I guess Amazon's gonna do it for me. Okay, more world building happening here.
Can't let them find this.
Who's coming?
The cyborg.
That's the second and third time that the cyborg has now been referenced since this character's been introduced. So just really adding in their importance. So our catalyst is the reveal of this orb. The inn is gone, the pirates have escaped. It's not good news, but they do have this orb, and given what we know about the story, this should be now propelling them forward onto the overarching A-plot.
Even with my vast experience and superior intellect, it would take me years to unlock its... Hey.
They played it for a joke, but it also helped move the story a lot faster than if it had just been an orb that they then spent decades studying and trying to figure out and make it do this. It probably wouldn't have been as interesting as of a film. So when jokes can have additional merit like that, you're just adding more into every line that you write.
It's...
Treasure Planet.
Don't you remember? All those stories? That's all they were. Stories.
The conversation being revisited now, having the mom initially been a lot more understanding or considerate to his feelings about them, and him sort of being more adamant about it being a worthy sort of pursuit.
I'm going with you. I'll use my savings to finance an expedition. I'll
commission a ship.
So he's helped move the story along in a different way. He's now the one who's going to finance this trip and help sort of propel the journey into what will be our second act. What we're being told by what is presumably his living conditions based on how he's running around collecting things, that he has the resources to do that because it's quite a lavish property. It overrides the one-on-one head-off that would happen if it had just been Jim and his mom trying to figure out their next move here. With him being on board with the plane and being able to make it more of a reality, it can't be dismissed as easily as an option.
There are much worse remedies than a few character-building months in space. Are you saying this because it's the right thing, or because you really want to go? I really, 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 really want to go. And it's the right thing.
Page 12 to 25 is considered the debate. You're introduced to the catalyst, which is what will allow for the story to be propelled forward. He's figured out that he has a map now to Treasure Planet. They actually have the blueprints on how to get there. He has someone who's willing to finance the trip because they also get something out of it.
Whoever brings it back would hold an eternal place atop the pantheon of explorers.
That feels believable. The reasoning for Jim wanting to go isn't necessarily just to get rich for the sake of being rich. He wants to help set things right with his mom, and then she's willing to agree to it based on what he's just said and her not knowing what else to do. We have outgoing motive for the film, but then everybody's internal motivations as to why they want to go on that journey are different. If you saw the movie 1917, which got quite a lot of accolades based on the fact that it gave off the impression of being one continuous shot, what we saw just now was an example of how they pulled that off. They used the wipe across to hide the cuts being made.
Jim! Oh, Jim, wait for me!
Aside from the relationship dynamic being set up here, where he's like a bit kind of irked by his presence, despite what he's able, him being able to finance the expedition and everything, is we're starting to see a change develop in Jim. He's made this decision now to do something good for his mom to help her rebuild the inn. Visually, that's being reflected by a change in his wardrobe.
You know what they say, familiarity breeds, well, contempt. But in our case...
Look, let's just find the ship.
Nice little visual nod to them not necessarily being cut from the same cloth. It's him actually wearing fabrics and Dilbert in a little bit more of a concerned, sort of safeguarded suit. So we're not still in Act 2 yet. Act 2 will happen at page 25. Actually, damn, this film's pretty short. I'm just gonna go off the traditional beat sheet and say that they probably didn't have a third act necessarily, but Act 2 is gonna happen around here. That's when it's gonna start. We still haven't finished really meeting all the characters and everything, but we are now being introduced to the ship. Robert Louis Steven wrote Treasure Island, so the book is called The RLS Legacy.
Sorry about that. I didn't mean...
This might be the worst part of this movie, is that they felt the need to have a character it is a kid's movie, right? So they have to throw in some fart jokes here and there just to kind of keep the kids invested. I do think it pulls away from the caliber of screenwriting that is happening. You gotta do what you gotta do.
Allow me to handle this. I'm fluent in flatula, Jim. Took 2 years of it in high school.
But you remember 2 years of a language you took in school and haven't worked on since? Not buying it.
The captain's aloft.
The level of immersion happening even in sort of the vernacular. For someone who likes words and enjoys language, it's definitely a bonus.
To muse and blabber about a treasure map in front of this particular crew demonstrates a level of ineptitude that borders on the imbecilic.
So that right there might be my favorite line of the entire film. God, it's gonna sound pretentious. There's no way to avoid it. I love the mastery of the delivery on it.
In the future, you will address me as captain or ma'am. Is that clear?
Reluctance to kowtow to authority doesn't feel out of place for his character, given how he's interacted with police in the past. Similar color patterns happening there.
Why, Mr. Arrow, sir. Had I known, I'd have talked to me, sir.
We're actually seeing the capabilities of the technology and how they're likely to play a role in furthering the plot down the line. The animators visited Benihana restaurant to take notes for the scene with John Silver chopped shrimp. Cool. What's also interesting, we've hinted at who the cyborg is prior to actually meeting him. We've seen a silhouette and we've had a expository relay between Jim and the other crash-landed captain. But the first time that we actually meet and spend any time with this character, he's cooking. In doing so, lends to him not being a one-dimensional evil pirate. Much in the same way Jim, who's a troubled kid, has the potential to be good. This guy who he's got a idea of in his head as being like this evil cyborg has already shown to us that he is capable of just as easily making nice. In doing that, what it does is sets up the far more likelihood of Jim being able to connect with Captain Silver than he ever was with Dr. Doppler. With it being a kid's movie, you need to be able to sell toys. That being said, he actually lends to the advancement of the plot far more than whatever those penguin things were.
See to it the new cabin boys kept busy.
Parallelism, common ground, yeah, mirroring behavior.
What was that old salamander's name? Oh yeah, Bones.
He did something very smart there. He clarified who the captain was in terms of his species. He was a salamander, as well as giving his name, so there'd be no confusion as to who he was talking about. And Silver, for his part, is playing it very cool. You know, he's just working away. That's a subtlety that, for a kid's film, is less likely to be picked up on by the audience members. So the launch is actually happening on the other side of minute 25, but so we're in Act 2 now. Jim not necessarily having a place on the ship top yet, you know, he's not equipped necessarily to deal with life in space.
Mr. Snuff, engage artificial gravity.
Nice touch on the world building. We're seeing how it's possible for them to be able to breathe and interact in space. 2D and 3D animation working together again in a really cool way. There's been a desaturation to the color of the animations that we're seeing. It lends to sort of this dynamic being played up between the crew members and then Jim, and introducing them and their role within the story and how they're going to be an opposing force.
Maybe your ears don't work so well.
Too bad my nose works just fine.
So he's willing to stand up against intimidation. He's not afraid of danger. We're also getting parallelism between this crew member and Silver's yellow cyborg eye, connecting them together, and you know how Silver might have the potential to be as evil as this guy's character.
There'll be no brawling on this ship. Am I clear, Mr. Screw? Well done, Mr. Arrow, sir.
More character interactions happening there. Silver exercising his strength over the spider character. The captain's first mate exercising his position on the ship as being, you know, number 2, and basically everybody fell in line the second he showed up. And we have Silver kowtowing to him and, you know, acknowledging him for being able to return discipline and order. There is an element of him being disingenuous. He's clearly trying to keep the peace for now.
You want to blow the whole mutiny before it's time? The boy was sniffing about. I run him so ragged he won't have time to think.
When Silver was cooking, he let Jim go and see the launch, right? He didn't necessarily put him to work right away, because just because he was assigned this motive by the authority doesn't mean he was necessarily gonna follow it. Again, when Jim was on sort of like the rigging.
By the way, isn't that your cabin boy aimlessly footling about in those shrouds?
He rectified it in front of the captain, but it's not something that he necessarily has any inclination to actually sticking towards until this scene. Now he has incentive to actually push Jim to doing chores for the sake of keeping him from snooping about and ruining their plan.
Thanks.
Didn't your pap ever teach you to pick your fights a bit more carefully?
An important thing to remember, the order in which conversations happen in films is largely the order in which they're the priority for the characters participating in them. It's a fitting point in the narrative for their montage to start. So the 30-minute mark of a story is the beginning of the B-plot, what'll tie into the overarching plot, in this case being the journey to find Treasure Planet. It begins with Jim being told to mop the deck, and then the crew thing happened, and then Silver interfered. They had a heart-to-heart, then we got to the montage. That's the B-plot that's happening on the ship while we're still moving towards the A story. That's what the last 3 minutes have been. Interesting choice for them not to show the father's face. Reinforces how he's unfamiliar to Jim. He's seeing stuff that goes against his preconceived notions of who the cyborg was. Everything tells the story. That in and of itself was a character moment. He was trying to teach him there, and he's already like, nah, I got this. Hold my beer. The purple is coming back to the sky. First time that got introduced, it was like the piece right before the pirates appeared, maybe to address the intercom that is returning to Jim now that he has someone to guide him a little bit. Or maybe there's just smoke and fat clouds, you know, it could be that too.
If I could maneuver a skip like that when I was your age, they'd be bowing in the streets when I walked by today.
They weren't exactly singing my praises when I left home.
But I'm gonna change all that.
High moments, like moments of levity, joy, friendship, should be followed with a moment that undercuts them to feel like the script isn't constantly repeating itself. We've had the moment where they've built up a relationship, they're friendly, they was praising him for his ability to maneuver the ship, and then Jim discloses how the fact, yeah, well, I wasn't technically being praised when I left home, but I'm going to change that, hinting again at the A story, which is that, you know, he's going on this mission to find the treasure, but we also know that the cyborg is on the ship for a similar reason. He was willing to chase down the map from Bones previously, and now we're seeing a conflict of interest.
Sometimes plans go astray.
Not this time.
Jim was pretty adamant that he was going to be able to pull this off and rectify things for himself. And the first thing Silva did as a result of that was bring up his cyborg leg. Hint at perhaps the cost of ambitions that are that ambitious. And now we're going to get... Actually, this might be one of my favorite lines of the movie. Because we never really get a whole ton about Silva's backstory, but it's perfectly encapsulated in this sentiment.
How'd that happen anyway?
You give up a few things, chasing a dream.
With the flute in the background too. We're out of the B plot again. We're back into the A plot in space on the journey to find a pirate planet. Cool color changes as well. Visual way of reinforcing that, you know, danger, red alert, alarms, things like that. So he's now saved Silva's life. If you're trying to sway favor of the audience, you'll have one character save the other, and then everything that the character does after that, the one that has been saved, the audience starts to go, damn dude, but he saved your life. So you have to have moments where it comes back the other way. We saw this happen in the second act, which means for the sake of pacing, that setup we'd want to be called back in the finale.
A black hole!
We're being pulled in! Oh, no, you don't!
See her earning her stripes as captain. That's what's made her, you know, the leader of the ship. But she's not willing to let go of the helm when duty demands it.
Make sure all lifelines are secured!
Had that happened without the first mate being booted from the ship, there would have really been no repercussions to that plot event of the supernova. A good script introduces things that result in consequences, which is why, although it's sad, you sort of need the first mate dying in that moment for there to then be more shifts that happen in how the characters come to develop with one another. We don't need you though, Marv.
Finer than most of us could ever hope to be.
Where before the captain was in blue and the first mate was in red and Doppler was in his big clunky spacesuit, now the first mate is gone and Doppler's in red. And we saw with how the captain and the first mate was interacting that there was a relationship of mutual respect and friendship in a lot of ways. Oh, he's fully silhouetted there. And he's got his black jacket back on as well, the visual imagery reflecting how he feels internally.
I screwed up! I mean, for 2 seconds, I thought that maybe I could do something right.
So what I would have liked there, just to make it feel less like Jim is solely dwelling on his own shortcomings there, is more like him acknowledging the loss of the first mate. It felt totally navel-gazing. Naval Academy, God, it's funny how the mind works.
You listen to me, James Hawkins.
James Pleiades Hawkins!
I hope I'm there, catching some of the light coming off you that day.
We're now seeing visually his spirits lift a little bit by him walking into a more well-lit, warmer space, and him still being in the blue because he's obviously still the pirate captain and has this other ambition. And then the added dun-dun-dun. Both times we've seen reference to the treasure planet, either in the map or in the book, it's been a green hue. Might be the association with cash, but it also sets up what the scene that's about to begin in this space is going to be prioritizing.
I care about one thing and one thing only. Flint's throne.
Heartbreak in that moment.
Always hated to lose.
Me too.
Thing that he saw him working on the boat when they got back from their outing on the skip gets called back in that moment. You know, Jim's just learned that it always just heard him saying all that stuff to his pirate crew, and it felt like a betrayal of trust, and so he's responded with his own betrayal of trust. You know, tit for tat a little bit.
More here.
Just trying to really emphasizing his dark side taking over.
That's it. Talk to Papa.
We've seen earlier from the sequence with him firing on that thing in space that guy's quite a good shot. Again, just setting up what's introduced. Nothing feels totally like it hasn't been already included.
Captain!
With her having experience being part of the Navy, in order for it to still be Jim's story, you sort of have to bench a character that is that OP in this setting. Otherwise, it would fully be her taking the lead on things. Morph actually had a narrative purpose. Yeah, so he's out here, you know, trying to find a place for them to be able to hide. But when you travel to a new planet, you have to meet new characters. He has green eyes, and every time we've seen the color green so far, it's been associated with the treasure map and the hunts for Treasure Planet. A subtle hint at what his role will be.
And you are? Wait, what about the treasure? I want to say Larry. How about drinks for the happy couple?
Thank you, we don't drink, and we're not a couple.
Order again, right? We don't drink and we're not a couple. It's not we're not a couple and we don't drink. That sort of idea is becoming at least more accepting to him. How she reacts might suggest that it's there's a commonality to it. Yeah, so she's very much like, you know, not opposed to the idea either.
I wondered where you lit off to. Whatever you heard back there, I didn't mean a word of it. So help me, I'll use the ship's cannons to blast you all to Kingdom Come! Mark, hop to it. Now!
So I'll just
Slip out the back door.
back door.
Plot convenience. I mean, it's a Deus Ex Machina.
Whoops!
This guy is causing more problems than he is solving. Potential for disaster here. More than just a simple standoff with a gun. Just making a more interesting finale. Call back to the fact that the thing's not that easy to open if you don't know what to do. Oh.
Booby trap!
Do you remember how I said Jim saved Silver's life?
Silver, you gave up this a lifelong obsession, Jim. I'll get over it.
There's a portal back there. You can get us out of here. Didn't that portal open onto a raging inferno? Yes! But I'm gonna change that.
An actual metaphor for him changing the course of his destiny. His cyber abilities coming into use. And then we get a mirroring on the surfer thing that he had from the beginning. Also a mirroring in the calm again of the sky.
Ludicrously effective. I'd be proud to recommend you to the Interstellar Academy.
What say you ship out with us, lad?
So now he's got the potential to go to the Navy or go piracy, but he's already changed the door.
Now, what future?
And what do you see?
A future.
As for your dear mother, to rebuild that inn of hers.
Nicer food on display. He's changed from someone who wasn't good with kids to having 4, and he's coming now in white. So that was Treasure Planet. What was your favorite part? Really? That was the worst part of the movie. If you're interested in learning how to write screenplays, I actually have a course that tells you how to outline them. You can find a link to it in the description below. Thank you again for watching my video. Were you gonna say something?